How's it going, everybody? It's your boy Gage, and today I'm going to be going in depth in the Paleozoic frog strategy. I haven't uploaded a deck profile for this deck in a very long time, and I've been tinkering around with it. It is definitely a very experimental build, and I think that we will have fun going over the different tech options. It will probably be also a quite controversial video for paleo frogs specifically because I do make some interesting choices. So I'm very excited to go into it. And without further ado, let's just begin. So 3 of the best starter and extender in your deck. Swap Frog. On summon, he can pitch a card, normal or special summon, pitch a frog from the deck to grave. So usually you're getting your Ronin Totem in the graveyard to be able to start with the recursion process, and then he can also bounce himself back to the hand, and he can special summon himself by discarding a frog, and he's just insane. I mean, the amount of advantage that he brings allows you to get into one of the best boss monsters in the game rather frequently. Now, here is one of the more controversial choices I decided to make. So I'm playing 1, 2, 3 Ronin Totem. And now the reason that I do this is because first and foremost, Swap Frog himself, all paleo players know that he's not really good just on his own. He's definitely better paired with another frog. In this case, Ronin Totem being the best one. If something happens where Ronin Totem gets banished, unfortunately, this deck, it struggles. You really do need that second copy in order to make sure that you constantly have recursion coming in the graveyard for at least a Link 2. So the third Ronin Totem comes up. I'm always glad that I had it just in case. Call by the Grave isn't at 3, so it hasn't been as much of an issue, but I still want to make sure that I max out on it so that my deck doesn't completely die if it's banished. So that is one of the more controversial choices. So another frog, when I was really analyzing the deck, I asked myself, okay, what are the best frogs that I can play? And honestly, there aren't too many of them. But what I did decide to do was cut Dupe Frog down to 1. The reason that I did this is because everyone knows this is the worst one. His ability to search a frog almost never resolves, and honestly, it's just not good enough. I do run the one because of we need frogs for Ronin Totem no matter what, but you can set up an interesting play with, you'll see that I'm running Avermax in the extra deck. It does set up a nice lock where your opponent, if you have Avermax and this card on the field, your opponent cannot declare an attack. They legally cannot declare an attack. So yeah, that's pretty cute. But other than that, I really just asked myself, okay, if I am forced, because no matter what, if you have it with Swap Frog, you're going to use it to special summon it anyway. So I had to ask myself, all right, what are frogs that actually do something? And so what I did was I decided to start playing Flip-Flop Frog. So many of you might not know what this card does. It's almost never seen play in the frog strategies, at least meta-relevant ones. But essentially, it's a non-targeting, non-destruction compulse. It can, if it's flip face up, it can send a monster on your opponent's side of the field back to the hand up to the number of frogs on the field. So most of the time, at least, if I have this and 4 other traps, I could just go ahead and set this and know, okay, if they do swing, I get to send a monster from the opponent's side of the field to their hand for free. But there are really cute setups where if you have multiple frogs on the field while he is when he is flip-faced up, you can send, again, up to as many frogs, up to as many cards your opponent controls, up to as many monsters your opponent controls back to their hand up to the number of frogs. So if you had a Swap Frog, a Ronin Totem, and then you flipped up Flip-Flop Frog, now you can send 3 monsters from your opponent's side of the field back to their hand, and that is so strong. Obviously, certain matchups it's better than others, but I want a frog that can actually do something in a pinch. And Flip-Flop Frog, being a compulse, it actually gives it needed, much necessary utility. And then the last of the water monsters, 3 Barrier Statue of the Torrent. So with Totally Awesome currently at 2, the deck does struggle with being able to slow the opponent down. So I really want to be able to play blowout cards so that I can guarantee that I can win going first. Most decks special summon, so Barrier Statue of the Torrent is insane. I mean, the only real outs to it are like, you know, Gamma Seal, if you're playing that. Most people are not playing kaijus. So the fact of the matter is that this forces people to skip their turn. You know, I've considered things like and played the artifact package in the past, but why play that when it has 2 bricks? Because, you know, artifact scythe is essentially considered a brick. Why play that package when I could just play Barrier Statue and now I could shut off all of my opponent's special summoning as opposed to just the extra deck with Sanctum? So I figured that while out of all the cards in my deck, this is the one that's least useful going second if your opponent already has an established board. The fact that this auto wins you sometimes is just enough to play it on its own. And essentially, there is no reason why, if you're running an all-water deck and you can afford the special summon, if you can afford the normal summon, then Barrier Statue is the way to go. And now for the last of the monsters, Triple Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. I like a card where I know I can at least get some utility out of it. Most decks are affected by Ash Blossom. And even if, because in our format it's pretty fast, so we see a lot of decks that can play through hand traps. But the thing is, Ash Blossom is always going to be relevant. Unfortunately, it's once per turn, so if you do draw into multiples, that's unfortunate. But at least I can slow my opponent down a little bit to be able to do everything that I need to as far as set up my graveyard with frogs and paleos. That way, I am at least slowing them down. I've considered things like Nibiru, right? But a lot of decks are able to set up a negate before that happens, so then I just have a dead card in my hand. Why would I want a dead card in my hand when I could just at least, if they use their normal summon to add something from deck to hand or send a grave, I can at least hit them with an Ash Blossom, and even if they can continue to extend, I've slowed them down to a certain degree, and then hopefully if I do have traps, for example, or maybe a Toad on the field, that will be enough to be able to hold off my opponent long enough for me to actually get my combos going, get my Toad set up, and to really start to snowball in advantage. So Ash Blossom remains the king as far as hand traps go, in my opinion. Now, I'm playing the best and worst Paleozoic Dinomischus. I mean, it banishes. That's a very strong effect. It's one of the most powerful effects in Yu-Gi-Oh! Really, to banish a monster. The thing about it is that it requires you to discard. So that does kind of suck. I mean, you are running the Ash Blossoms. You have Ronin Totem, so if you can't end up getting a Swap Frog play out of that, and you do, you know, you're forced to just set the Ronin Totem, but you have a Dinomischus, you might as well just hold the Ronin Totem in your hand so that you can pitch it off Dinomischus and at least get its value in the grave. That's an ideal scenario, but really, Dinomischus is a 2-for-1. And you have to I always have to ask myself, man, is banishing this one card going to be worth losing out in card advantage? Because Paleos can't really generate too much card advantage in the very beginning. They are slow burning. So the thing about it is that can be killer sometimes. That loss in card advantage really, really makes a difference. And yeah, so it's the best and the worst one. You kind of have to play it because there aren't that many good Paleos to begin with. And then the second best paleo being Canadia. You know, when Link Summoning first came out, obviously this hindered Canadia's ability quite a bit. Being able to Book of Moon and flip an opponent's monster face down, that is very powerful. The problem is that it doesn't work on Link monsters. So you just have to hope that you use this on something that you know is going to be used as material for a Link summon or a summon of some sort, and at least deny them that and hope that that's enough. And sometimes it is. Sometimes you can Book of Moon an imperative monster that someone was going to use to Link climb into something stronger, but now they can't because it's put in face down defense position and they can't use that monster as material anymore. So Canadia, you know, it's not as good as Dino-Miscus, but at least it's free. You don't have to pitch anything off of it. You just get to flip a monster face down. So, and going second, it's going to require a negate. So it's even still good going second because no matter what, it's going to bait a negate if necessary. I'm also playing double Olenoids. So it's a spell and trap destruction. It destroys spells and traps. But if I'm playing against a deck that really doesn't, like, I'm not playing against a back row deck or a deck that has an imperative field spell, this kind of becomes a dead card. And then you're in this awkward scenario where you have, in order to get its effect to special summon, to be able to get the chains off of the Paleos to special summon themselves, you have to pop your own spells and traps, which that's not ideal. You never want to go negative in card advantage by destroying your own things. You always want to be able to destroy your opponent's stuff, but that's why I run it at 2. I mean, there are relevant field spells right now from Mystic Mind that you just don't want to get blown out from. You can hit Magical Meltdown in any invoked strategies. You can also use it to hit, I mean, really just random field spells that come up. I mean, Salamangrate still have their Sanctuary. I guess that's slightly relevant in preventing them from reincarnate summoning. So, and then, yeah, it's good against trap strategies, but, you know, you'll see an option in the side deck in the event that I am going up against any trap-heavy strategies. So, in the main deck, I found 2 was just enough. And now, 3, Solemn Judgment. No matter what, I love this card. This card is essentially just saying no to your opponent, and it's always going to be live. You're just going to pay half your life points. So no matter what, even if you have 100 life points, you could still flip this up to negate a summon or a spell or trap card, and now you have 50 life points. It's always live, as opposed to things like Solemn Strike, which you do have to have 1,500 life points, more than 1,500, in order to gain its ability. And if you do just so happen to have below that, then it's essentially a dead card. Whereas Judgment, it's always going to be good. This is the only main deck out if you're not able to establish a Toad. This is the only out to blow out cards like Lightning Storm and Evenly Matched. It is imperative that you run these, because with them running around, and Harpy's Feather Duster. So with them running around, you have to have a way to be able to protect yourself in a pinch, and Judgment has come in so clutch because of that. So I recommend 3 Judgment. And then 3 Crackdown. Super, super powerful. I mean, in mid combo, you just steal someone's monster. If it's an important Link monster that they need to Link climb, you just denied them that. Then you could use that monster for your own next turn, use it for your own materials, and just continue to Link climb from there. It's so busted. I love Crackdown. These are the only cards in the deck. I am playing Trap Trick. These are the only cards in the deck that you can't Trap Trick out, but I wanted to make sure if there were any cards that I were going to play in the deck that I couldn't bring out with Trap Trick, that they were going to be some pretty damn good cards. And unfortunately, Judgment isn't as good going second, but that's just kind of the necessary evil because you need it for Evenly and Lightning Storm. But Crackdown is really good going second because no matter what, it's going to cause or bait a negate. And then I have 3 copies of Storming Mirror Force. Non-destruction, non-targeting removal. There are so many times where people go to swing, not expecting Storming Mirror Force, and it's perfect because they'd never see it coming, and if they don't have a negate established, they lose their entire board. That is huge because if they lose their board, they essentially just have to pass. And obviously no deck likes to pass. As I mentioned, the grind for this deck, because of Toad being at 2, is a lot lower. So you have to try to slow the opponent down as much as possible, which is why I'm playing so many cards that kind of react to your opponent and stop their summons and stop their effects. We're also playing 3 Compulse. Again, if I can send an opponent's monster, I've sent a Boral Sword back to someone's hand before. I've sent so many things that you really just want it gone. If it can be targeted, you can hit it with Compulse. And it's just good to know that you have this at your disposal. It's also, all of these are also searchable off Trap Trick as well. I am running, I do not have impermanences, but I am running 2 Breakthrough Skill. It's good going first and second and has pretty crazy utility going first and second. So you can negate an opponent's monster effect, and then the next turn, if it was in the graveyard, you can negate another person's effect. I like this more than Lost Wind because Lost Wind only targets monsters that were special summoned, and I like being able to target monsters that were normal summoned because oftentimes they have some pretty strong effects at getting their combos started. So I like Breakthrough Skill. I think it's slept on. I think it's better than Titanocider. Obviously, if I had Impermanence, that would be this, but I do think that this is a really good tech card as an alternative. And then, lastly, the Trap Tricks to be able to search out the traps. I really don't like drawing into 2 because it's only once per turn. No matter what, you wouldn't have been able to use a second one anyway because you're locked out of traps for the rest of the turn. So this is a really good card. Just after you've already used up all of your traps, you then Trap Trick into something that would be able to, if you really did end up using all of your traps at that point and you just needed a Hail Mary, that's what Trap Trick is. It's just to make sure, hey, do I need a Paleo to be able to go into Toad next turn? Let's grab that. Oh, am I about to die? Let me just grab Stormy Mirror Force real quick. I mean, it's really good as a Hail Mary, but I don't like drawing into 2 of them. So that's why I run it at 2 as opposed to 3. Now for the extra deck, 2 copies of Toad. Please come back to 3. I believe that Konami sees that frogs aren't really doing too much. It is a rogue deck, so hopefully they'll just bump them back to 3 because I don't think it will definitely help us a lot. It's not going to push us to be broken or anything like that, but it would be nice for the grind game to be able to have a 3rd. Opabinia, the best Paleo extra deck monster, being able to search for traps and then activate them from the hand, Paleo traps from the hand is pretty crazy. So, yeah, that does come up. I have Sky Cavalry Centauria. This card is non-targeting removal of big boss monsters. As you can see, I really am afraid of things that cannot, because most of the Paleos target the Crackdowns, the Compulses, they all target. So I need something in the extra deck that's going to be able to out something in a pinch. And Sky Cavalry Centauria actually does that rather well. That's it for the Xyz monsters in the extra deck. I have, for the Link 4s, Mech Knight Crusadia Avermax, Boral Sword, and Appaloosa. So these are really good. I mean, you could go into Avermax super easy. I'm also running IP. So if you IP into Avermax, that's a really hard card to out. Obviously, OTK potential for Boral Sword. And if you want to, if you really have the ability to, and you have extra materials after making a Toad, you can make an Appaloosa if you know your opponent is running a monster effect heavy deck, because sometimes that can be enough to really slow them down. And then the Link 3's Nightmare Unicorn, being able to spin something back is pretty useful, so it does come up. Nice to have. 2 Mistar Boy, super easy to get into. They help you to float. They float, so they help you to get some of your water monsters back into your hand. So you could use this to bring up a Toad back from the graveyard. If you really don't need a Toad, you could use it to grab a Swap Frog. So I like the recursion ability of Mistar Boy, because sometimes you're not always able to push for games. So if I'm able to go into 2 Mistar Boy, totally awesome. That's 8K. So if I'm not able to break your board from there, I could just main phase 2, use these to go into Avramax. Avramax and Toad, it's pretty good. Or you could just leave these out on the field, and if you feel like these will be destroyed, they'll help you get cards that you've already used for recursion purposes. As I mentioned, IP, really good in the deck. Lambda, because you're running the crackdowns, you do need another generic option that isn't IP, and I think Lambda does that pretty well. Morences Coral Anemone, special summons a water from the grave, super, super free. Phoenix, destroys spells and traps, and then an Entis for the Dogmatica matchup. Then I'll quickly go over the side deck. 3, Get Out. I usually, if I know I'm playing a deck that brings out a lot of monsters from the extra deck, I'll just swap this out for Compulse, and it's fantastic. Solemn Strike. If I know I'm going first, this is really good. Stops special summoned monsters, stops effect negation. So say if someone knows that they're going to attack into, let's say, a Storming Mirror Force, I could activate it, and if they try to negate it, I could just use Solemn Strike, and now no matter what, it goes through. So pretty strong play. Heavy Storm Duster, I'm not running 3 Olenoids, so this is a really good card for back row decks. Highly, highly recommend playing this. Dimensional Barrier, being able to lock your opponent out of a summoning mechanic from the extra deck is huge. If you're playing Zodiacs, just call Xyz monsters and they literally can't do anything. If you are playing against, you know, a synchro-based deck, which there are a lot of them, the Herald and Savage boards, you could just call Synchro, and they essentially, yes, they'll still be able to link summon, but at least you're locking them out of some important extra deck monsters that could have been a problem had you not used this. So, yeah, I'd say D-Barrier is pretty good. And then, to cheese in time, Magic Cylinder. So, yep, it does come up. I mean, if you are playing in an online format, if you're remote dueling, if you do have locals near you that are doing in-person tournaments, then you are playing by the time rules, so no matter what, it's going to come up. Yeah, it's really unexpected. Nobody expects this, so if it does come up, I side into this, and I can pretty much win in time due to this card. So, guys, that is it for the deck profile. It has been so long since I've done one for this deck. I'm going to try to upload more for different decks coming up. Yeah, so remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you have any recommendations for the deck or have any tech options that you're playing in yours that have worked out for you, please feel free to let me know. And yeah, this has been Gaber Gage, signing out.